Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode number 155 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones, Dominic Aragon here with you as we got a great guest this week. Blake Smith from WVJS in Owensboro, Kentucky, set to join us as we will be looking back at the wild weekend that was at Richmond. Austin Dillon gets the win, and there was a bit of controversy, as you could imagine. We will break it all down for you and look ahead to this weekend's action as well. Coming up in just a bit, we'll take a look at our top headlines across the sport mailbag segment at the end of today's show as well. Dominic Aragon joins me right now. Dominic, let's jump right into it. Austin Dillon, 32nd in points entering the night, and had a good car all weekend. Practice qualifying, that team looked like a totally different team off the Olympic break. And you and I talked about last week who was going to take advantage of that Olympic break as a reset. That team clearly did. And he led much of this race, and it looked like he was on his way to victory. Caution comes out with 2 to go. Win the race off pit road. Restart, he loses the lead to Joey Logano. And then chaos enthralled us all just from there. What a wild finish there for Austin Dillon to get the win.
I got to say, Tyler, we used to pick on him on the show, but it's all in good love. It would have been great to hear Darrell Waltrip call that from the booth. Have you? Because I think a lot of us have never seen something like that. But the fact that Logano got bumped and then Hamlin gets hooked into the outside retaining wall, Dillon crosses the line as the winner. And at the taping of this show, the penalties have still not come out if those are going to happen. But we know NASCAR typically makes the penalty announcements Tuesday at about 5 o'clock Eastern. Tyler, very telling that NASCAR did not make that call, has not announced the penalties again at the taping of this show. So that tells you NASCAR is deliberating. Whatever the outcome is on that, they're taking a hard look at this, and they're looking at all angles too, because it didn't end there. We saw the onboard camera there with Joey Logano on pit road. We were talking about it before we came on air, possibly a steering column issue, maybe a toe link, who knows? But not a good look with the 22 with the burnout in front of the pit box and almost hitting a few people, including Austin Dillon's wife and child and NASCAR officials, shutting that down real quick. I feel like there's a lot of pissed off people inside NASCAR and with the drivers and the teams.
So let me ask you this about what Austin Dillon did for a second here. Getting that win, obviously he needed a win to get the playoff. And this format is set up where win and you're in, and that was his only shot to get in the postseason. And he did whatever it took, literally whatever it took to get that W there. I know it wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. You could argue whether it was the right thing to do or not. I don't think NASCAR can really penalize Austin Dillon because he played everything within by the rule books that NASCAR has set. They said boys have at it. They've encouraged this type of behavior. You may not like it, and I totally understand you may not like it, but at the end of the day, this is the sport that we all signed up for. This is what exactly NASCAR wants of these guys going for it for these wins here, Dom.
Everybody accepted and agreed to the rules, the terms and conditions to be a competitor. They know what they're going after. They know the system is set up to win and you're into the playoffs. Maybe another format, we're not talking about a finish like this, but because of the product we have, this is the result that we get. And I got to imagine too, NASCAR has to like this to some degree, I would imagine, because you're getting publicity, you're getting more eyes on the sport, and people, what are we doing right now? We're talking about this, Tyler. We're not the only ones talking about this. It's being talked about all over social media, over X, Facebook groups, SiriusXM NASCAR, the competitors are talking about it. At the end of the day, NASCAR's loving the publicity.
One more thing, and then we will bring in Blake Smith here to the program. When you talk about Austin Dillon going forward, we mentioned that he ran well all weekend long, that team looked a lot better. What's your thoughts, Dom? Was this just a one-off? Is that 3-car just going to fade into the distance here and be forgotten about and get eliminated early on in the playoff? Or do you think this is legit that RCR crew, that number 3 team turned a corner here?
That is an excellent question. If they can replicate, because we have not seen outside of the Coliseum race, Tyler, Richard Childress Racing look really good on a short track. They figured something out. At least the 3 team did. We have 2 short tracks in the playoffs. We have Bristol. we have Martinsville. And if Dillon and team can pick up stage points and continue to advance, he only has three top 10 finishes through the first 23 races. Certainly the weakest car in the playoffs at this point and this juncture, in my opinion. But you got to imagine winning fixes a lot of things. That creates momentum. They're short tracks. We know RCR is really good on intermediate tracks as well. We've seen that speed out of Kyle Busch in the 8 car. So perhaps the start of something new here. I don't know. We'll have to just wait and see. But we've seen Austin Dillon make first round exits in the playoffs before. I'm not convinced that this time, at least, Tyler, that we're seeing something different.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. We'll talk more about it coming up throughout the show. Dominic, our guest this week, Blake Smith from WVJS. Let's talk racing in Owensboro, Kentucky. Tell us about Blake and give the formal introduction here.
Well, Blake, if you've been listening to NASCAR and you've been in the southeast quadrant of the U.S., particularly Owensboro, you recognize his voice. He's been a staple across NASCAR and covering motorsports, not just behind the microphone, but they're at the racetracks too. You've probably seen him in media centers, trying to hustle interviews with different drivers. And I can tell you, he's got a depth of knowledge of the sport that's really, really awesome. And we talked about bringing him on the show. He said he wanted to do it and couldn't think of a more deserving person to have here on the panel that really knows a lot about the sport. And Blake, we just first and foremost want to thank you for joining us here this week on Let's Go Racing.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk about what I love, and that's NASCAR. I am the host of Let's Talk Racing out of Owensboro, so we're kind of a mix here on a NASCAR affiliate with my radio show. We do every Tuesday. We cover local, regional, and national racing. Of course, we've got a heavy local racing scene here in Owensboro. Of course, Nashville right down the road as far as regional, Louisville as well, and then, of course, the national racing scene. And I'm just happy to talk about it and happy to be on the show with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So, well, let's go back to the beginning there. The green flag is out in that first lap. How did you get interested in racing and what sparked that for you? Where did it all start for Blake?
I tell you what, I grew up a Bill Elliott fan as I sit here and don my 2002 Brickyard 400 shirt right now. I grew up as a Bill Elliott fan, and I was born in '89. So growing up, I didn't really hit the Bill Elliott heyday until he won that first race there in Homestead in '01. And so I started doing motorsports reporting for our local NASCAR affiliate at the time when I was 14. And since then, I've covered NASCAR and kind of done it. I'm a local PA as far as public address announcer for several of the local tracks. So it's a passion I've always loved. I've always loved to talk about it. And people say NASCAR is dying, but I hope to continue for it not to happen.
Absolutely. I feel like it might be on the upswing. And Tyler, it's always cool. We run into so many cool people working in this sport. And I got to tell you, just a little inside baseball, as you would say. Blake and I, we met at Kentucky a few years ago. And when back in the day, Kentucky Speedway was a part of the NASCAR schedule and was out there covering the 2018 race. And Bo Nine was there. Jeff was working with Bo Lamastis and the Crosley team. And Jeff had taken a few hours to kind of go away from the work. And he was in the press box with me. We were working on Jeff's book, and Blake was sitting next to us. And I remember him saying, I can't wait to read that when that comes out. And Blake and I have known of each other over the years, but we've really gotten to know each other this year. And man, it's a small world, as we know, Tyler. This industry is so much connected.
Yeah, it's awesome to see, and glad that you guys could connect in that way. So, Blake, tell me your story. How did you get involved in covering motorsports and doing what you do now, man?
So I've been a race fan, like I said, growing up. I watched NASCAR for years, went to the local track, and I've never had the desire to race. I've never wanted to get behind the wheel. I just love covering it and talk about the stars and making local names be known on the regional national stage. And that's what I love to do. And I love, like I said, the public address side of it. I love the motorsports broadcasting and that side of it. And it really is, it's a passion, and I just love to be able to do it.
That's great.
And I know you were saying before we came on air, but like you try to make it to about 6-8 NASCAR race weekends a year, but I know it goes beyond the NASCAR schedule. You got to put a number on it, from the local, the regional, the national scene, all the race weekends and tracks that you go to. How often are you on the road? How often are you at the track across any of the series?
I'm at a track every weekend, usually 2 or 3 nights a week, whether it be the local track. I'm the track announcer for both Windy Hollow track Skagway and Windy Hollow Speedway. I also do some announcing at Kentucky Motor Speedway, where the Greens, the Waltrops, and Mayfield got their start. I do go-kart racing, and then in between then, I try to figure out where I can hit up NASCAR races and be able to cover that as far as when I can fit it in the schedule. So I'm at a track every weekend, whether it be local, regional, or national. I'm usually behind the mic somewhere and trying to find the next big story.
That's great. What are some of your favorite stories that you've covered and trying to find those next stories? What are the ones that have stood out to you over the years, man?
I tell you what, we've got the biggest story right now out of our area, and it's really neat. There's a young man here named Stetson Stroop. He's a 5-year-old racer out of Owensboro. His dad is Dakota Stroop, who's been a long-time racer in the late model series. Well, over the summer, Stetson has signed on as a development driver for Kyle Busch Motorsports. So that's kind of give us a link here out of Owensboro to their Millbridge. He runs Millbridge Weekly with Kyle Busch. So that's a big story we're following right now, trying to make the next big name out of Owensboro for NASCAR. Of course, like I said, the Waltrops, Greens, Mayfield, numerous teammates and crew members have come out of Owensboro. So we're pushing that. And then just following the week-to-week stuff, just those little tidbits you can get in the media center that maybe somebody will overlook, and you can develop that into a story and really, get some notice on that.
Certainly.
That's cool.
Absolutely. And I was telling Tyler before we got on the show this week, you'll be at Atlanta Motor Speedway here in a few weeks. And man, got to ask you too, we're going to be talking about the schedule, and of course we'll be going into the playoffs and stuff too, but what are some of your favorite national tracks to go to? And is there any that you really circle and you're like, I'm really looking forward to covering that race weekend, or how that all looks?
I tell you what, I just love Atlanta. And I've talked with Brandon Hutchison on my show last week. I told him I just love the track, the Southern hospitality. It's just a great facility. I also, in the last couple of years, have really grown to like Worldwide Technology Raceway over in St. Louis. It's the old Gateway track. It's about 3.5 hours from me. I like how everything is close in proximity. You know as well as I, all three of us know, a track that can save you some steps going from the media center to the garage area to the track quickly becomes a favorite.
Oh, certainly. So Texas Motor Speedway, I would imagine they're in Tyler's backyard and David's backyard as well. Really cool that everything's centralized and that Southern hospitality as well. I feel that we got to get you out to Texas, Blake. They do it right at Texas, and just like Atlanta, Tyler, we got to get you out there too. We got to get you out to a racetrack there someday.
Hey, I'm all about some Texas. I like the track there in Fort Worth.
And in fact, Tyler's been behind the wheel, David's racing school and Team Texas High Performance. Tyler's gotten to turn some laps. I know you shared the story before, but to some of our new listeners, Tyler, what was that experience like to get behind the wheel of an actual cup car and just hammer it down into the corners?
Yeah, I need to do it again. It was like the best roller coaster you've ever ridden, times 10. Like, it just incredible. And cars around you going 150 miles an hour too. I mean, just unbelievable. I can't wait to do it again sometime. But Atlanta, like, I want to go to Atlanta one of these days, guys, but I'm not trying to go to Atlanta when it's 110 degrees outside. Like, we got to figure out a better date for these Atlanta races here. My goodness.
I got to say, too, the fact that this race, barring, of course, rain, we have the lights there, but I know it's scheduled for 3 o'clock Eastern here in a few weeks. I got to admit, Blake, that is going to be hot in the middle of September. It's going to be somewhat muggy. It's probably going to be in the low 90s. It's not going to be a favorable time to really be outside. We know NASCAR is an outdoor sport, but to a degree, and those degrees are going to be pretty hot in hot Atlanta.
I tell you what, I'm a fan of that February date in Atlanta. I like the option of having to wear a jacket through the garage area or not. That's always great. So, yeah, I'm kind of a fan of the February date myself. But, yeah, it's going to be a muggy in September and going to put on a heck of a show, too.
Yeah, that'd be my only – I don't know if complaint's the right word or gripe, but I feel like we saw a great day to night race. We've seen great night racing in Atlanta. It would make a lot of sense to make that a night race, a Sunday night race in prime time. But I get it too. That's the NFL schedule, and there's so many factors. So they're going to try to squeeze that in where they can. But who's not to say, Blake, it would make sense to have that race as a night race, keep it on USA Network.
I think, I'm all for it.
Very cool. Very cool. Blake, you mentioned being a Bill Elliott fan. Who have been some of your favorite drivers that you've talked, whether you've covered or gotten to know some of the stories you've told? Kind of give us some context here. Who comes to mind of guys you've covered and been a part of over the years?
I'll tell you what, everybody asks me who's the assholes in the garage area, who's the ones you don't like, who's the ones you don't like to talk to. I've not met anybody that I don't like to cover, I don't like talking with. Now they all have their days. You talk to Kyle Busch after a P29 qualifying effort at Nashville, he's not going to be in the best of moods. But as far as, being courteous and answering the question, he's always there and to talk about it. I've never had a bad experience. My favorite driver to cover, and I'm going to go back to the Commonwealth of Kentucky connection here, is my good buddy Ben Rhodes. I talk to Ben quite often. Of course, Ben, the NASCAR Truck Series champion ×2. Interesting story with Ben. Back in 2018, I brought Ben here to Owensboro, Kentucky. Of course, Owensboro is known for its racing, barbecue, bluegrass music, the whole 9 yards. So I bring Ben down from Louisville, and we tour Owensboro for a day. We do Moonlight Barbecue for lunch. We go to a local high school to talk to their FFA students about racing and get the meet and greet with the driver. We toured the Kentucky Motorsports Hall of Fame, and then we put him on a racing show that night here in Owensboro on that Tuesday. That was a great experience, really down-to-earth guy, and I've got to say, I've not met anyone any nicer and more down-to-earth than my good buddy Ben Rhodes.
That's cool.
I gotta speak to that too, Tyler. The little bit I've interacted with Ben after maybe a top 5 finish, and he's in those little media scrums. He's just really chipper and really happy. And hey, if he wins, it's going to be a really awesome press conference. Like we've seen at least twice at Phoenix Raceway. You win that championship, you get drunk Ben Rhodes up there on the podium. You don't know what you're gonna get. But even when you don't get that side of Ben Rhodes, there's still something about him. And I would have to agree with you, Blake. He just stands out as somebody who you can tell he's humble about where he comes from. He knows what he's done. He knows his skills behind the wheel of a race car and a race truck, but doesn't really show that. Just kind of lets his performance do the talking, if you will.
Yeah, early in his career, his parents owned Alpha Energy, and they were a major sponsor on his race machines. Since then, they have since sold that team, and he's out there, making a name for himself for what he can do behind the wheel. It's not daddy's money buying that ride for Ben Rhodes now in these races. Of course, he's with Thor Sport doing a great job. He's made that Cup start there at the road course last year. Keep waiting for another chance for him to get an Xfinity or a Cup ride. I think Ben Rhodes is a great driver, both behind the wheel and behind a microphone as well.
Certainly. You see like a broadcast career for the man when it's all said and done, being in that truck booth or some sort of media role or capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. He's got the personality for it. So you talk about the Truck Series, interesting note here. Of course, Michael Waltrip from Owensboro, he's on the truck broadcast. And little known fact that Adam Alexander grew up about 30 to 45 minutes from Owensboro in a town called Evansville, Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got 2 broadcasters here within an hour from each other from the Truck Series. And little known fact, when Adam Alexander first started doing covering his motorsports, he was a basketball guy.
Yeah.
He was the voice of the Evansville Aces. So he had to learn motorsports. And so a lot of the folks around in this area taught him racing, and he got more comfortable with it on the radio, and look where he is today.
Yeah, Adam's a great friend of mine, and he speaks great of, Evansville, where he came from, and, his Kentucky roots and everything there. So that's cool to hear on that front. You mentioned the Waltrips being from Owensboro. I got to ask you about that. Michael and DW, just kind of tell me about those two. How proud is Owensboro to have both, not just Darrell, but Michael, both, of what they've done to represent that community, that city as 2 Daytona 500 champions, a Cup champion and Hall of Famer, and Darrell's right. I mean, it's one thing to have one guy from your hometown, but 2 of them and be brothers. I mean, what an incredible story that must be for Owensboro there.
Owensboro, Tyler, has so many names that are in the NASCAR garage these days, whether it be Darrell and Michael Waltrip, Jeremy Mayfield, Jeff David and Mark Green. I mean, we've got world champion motorcycle racer Nikki Hayden's from Owensboro. They're all from right here in our small town. It's a smaller town. We're the 3rd largest city in Kentucky. But when you look at racing per capita, where it comes from as far as crew members, drivers. It really is amazing what this small town has turned into, and we're so proud of each and every one of them. You'll see Daryl come by and he'll make a trip over to the barbecue joint and get a brisket sandwich or a pork sandwich, go hang out by the river in downtown Owensboro. You'll see Michael come up here and make a visit every once in a while. Jeremy Mayfield makes a trip. Jeff Green's back living here in Owensboro now, so he's still local. It's still big around here in Owensboro. I mean, motorsports has always been a staple in this area.
What's in the water there, Blake?
It's been that's been asked several times. They all grew up at Kentucky Motor Speedway, which is our local asphalt track right now. It's not currently running, but they've all, came from there. We don't know what's in the water, but we'd like to find some more of it and put it back in the tap.
Sure, and I feel like too there with Austin Green too, just continuing to rep that Owensboro pride. I gotta imagine too, he's got a future in NASCAR, and that's going to be full time someday. We've seen him make those select starts, so I feel like it's the gift that keeps on continuing to give with the proud motorsports people that come from Owensboro, and it seems like it's just going to continue for generations and generations, and it's still going.
Yeah, Austin Green, he's a great shoe behind the wheel. I've had him on my show a couple times talking about those Xfinity starts and wins, and he's a great road course racer. He's further developing his skills as far as the oval, so I think he'll be a force to be reckoned with as well.
So tell me this about the track there, Kentucky Motor Speedway there in Owensboro. You said not in operation right now. What's the history of that track, and could we see it potentially open back up? What's going on there?
Yeah, the track I'd say it's about a month away from a good paint job and some mowing and some bleach repairs to be back underway. It's a great track. The history, it's celebrated, 60 years in 2021. I had the chance to be the announcer for that season at Kentucky Motor Speedway, and it really is. The track's undergone some changes over the years from when the Waltrips and Greens and Jeremy raced out there, but it's still the racing history as it is. It's owned by Dakota's Group. I talked about him earlier, and his son Stetson. They use that as a practice facility. They stay very busy with their businesses, but we hope to see it open back again soon and producing some more names here from out of Owensboro.
Yeah, and it's so cool too. You hear about local tracks and just the grassroots movement around local racing. We have a local track here in Milan, New Mexico, just the next town over here in Grants. And we may not necessarily be the motorsports capital of the world. We're called the carrot capital, the uranium capital of the world, hence the name Uranium Capital Speedway. But you really do get to see, I think, a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears at that local level. And we know we have a lot of fans listening on our show that do support local racing. And I got to tell you, it's just different. You go to a local track versus a NASCAR garage. And you have tremendous respect for both, but there's just something about the guy that works 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and puts every penny he can into his hobby stock or his Amon or whatever he's racing. And it gives you a deep appreciation for motorsports altogether.
Yeah, and Owensboro's still producing big names. We talk about that young Stetson Stroop, last year's open wheel modified champion for the entire nation was Tyler Nicely. He's tried from out of Owensboro. He operates a go-kart track a half mile over the bridge in Rockport, Indiana. So, he stays busy with his racing. And Charlie Mefford made a big name for himself back at the Dome a few years ago there at the indoor race in St. Louis. He's down the road just in Muhlenberg County. So this whole area really is heavy with racing. We love our racing, and I'm just, privileged and blessed to be able to talk about it and hopefully keep the tradition going.
While we have you here, I think, Blake, people will be very curious about the situation at Kentucky Speedway. They worked so hard to get a cup race, and attendance was fantastic. And then just like that, the Cup Series was gone and it hasn't returned. They ended up giving that date to Atlanta, and Atlanta's got 2 races on the schedule again. What's the status with Kentucky, and what happened with that situation of them losing a cup race? Do you think we could see one ever return there?
That's another thing. Ben Rhodes and I talked about that back during the off season. They're still working on the infrastructure around the track. If you've been to Kentucky Speedway back in its early days, there was nothing around it. But now they're working on an airport around there, building hotels, restaurants. And like Kentucky Motor Speedway, it's a month or two away from a good paint job and, a little bit of work here and there to have a race back. They did a story and showed some drone footage. It still looks like it's in good shape. Its current use right now is it, I believe, is the world capital of Ford trucks sitting there waiting on chips to be put inside the machines. It's full of F-150s from the Ford Motor Company, waiting to be, chips to be put in those trucks and sold to the general public. So right now it's a parking lot for Ford. It's still used some as far as your Richard Petty driving experience, your Rusty Wallace driving experience. Those are still being used for that. But, we hated to see it. I don't think Kentucky ever completely recovered from the parking debacle of 2011. That was horrendous, and I don't think it ever recovered from that. Burn a race fan once, and sometimes they don't come back, and I think that's what happened. But I think with this new car, it put on a great race, especially with the repave and the reconfigure, and maybe NASCAR will give that date back sometime soon.
And we know too, Blake, NASCAR can be very, very, maybe reactive is not the right word, but they do listen to the fan base and they do monitor social media. Do you feel like that there was a big enough outcry from fans or media or drivers to get that Kentucky date back rather and just give it a second chance? Would they? Or are we looking at, like you said, the infrastructure? Is there a lot more going on behind the scenes that maybe we don't know about that it would take to get that race back?
I'm not sure, and I really don't know who owns Kentucky Speedway at the moment. There was talks there for a while. You mentioned Bo LeMastus was interested in purchasing that track. I'm not sure if that purchase ever went through. I'm not sure if SMI still owns it. There was questions asked, and nobody really ever got an answer out of that. But as well as I do, you're going to have one or two, maybe three different names that's going to be on that track for it to get a race back. And we've got tracks that are in driving distance from where we're at. You've got St. Louis, you've got Nashville Super Speedway, but I still think there's plenty of room in this market for Kentucky. You've got Cincinnati there, you've got Louisville, you've got Lexington, all within driving distance, and Kentuckians and Southern Indiana and Ohio folks love their NASCAR.
Well, according to Wikipedia, anyway, SMI still owns Kentucky Speedway, but obviously that could have changed, or maybe a wiki page hasn't been updated yet. But then, Dom, like a part of that discussion, if Kentucky were to ever come back, and let's say in theory they're still owned by SMI, NASCAR is not going to give up one of their dates. They would have to take away an SMI existing date, and then you have to figure out, okay, who's losing a race at that point to bring Kentucky back.
Exactly. And I feel like SMI is already paving the way for this Nashville Super Speedway or Nashville Speedway that stopped racing in 84 to be back on the schedule. And we already hearing that Bristol might get a date lost down the road. So I don't know. I feel like Bristol losing a date and they're going to give that to Nashville. If that happens, there's just no way Kentucky's just going to be so far down the totem pole. And I don't see NASCAR expanding to a 37 or 38 race schedule to give more races, another to a NASCAR-owned track, another to SMI. I don't see it happening, Tyler. But again, more things happen behind the scenes than we're ever aware about. But it would be cool. It would be cool to see Kentucky back. I've been once. I did enjoy the race weekend, went to go cover out there. Granted, it was a snooze fest. Truex led all the laps, it seemed like, and won all the stages. But nonetheless, really cool to see that Speedway, just see the passion. You did see a lot of passionate NASCAR fans out there.
Well, and I think too, and Blake, you can attest to this, I'm sure, it doesn't even have to be NASCAR Cup racing for me, as far as that's a good track that I would like to see involved, whether it's the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series or something, just be involved and see NASCAR competitive level racing out there, because it's these Cup dates are hard to come by, and we, like we mentioned, trying to take away from another track, whatever it may be. But if Kentucky can just get on the schedule in one of those series, to me, I think that'd be a big win. And who knows, Don? We've seen some crazy stuff happen before. Nobody thought Nashville Super Speedway was all of a sudden going to be on the Cup schedule. Nobody thought Gateway was going to be on the Cup schedule. Here we are, and NASCAR is not looking back. So, Blake, do you see that potentially as a possibility of seeing trucks or Xfinity or something like that potentially?
And Tyler, that may be the best bet. It may put on the best show for a truck or Xfinity. I've been there and enjoyed several race weekends, and I'll say the Truck and Xfinity Series put on a better race than the Cup Series. I mean, it was obvious. The Cup Series cars at the time were hard to pass. I think they're even more hard to pass now. So yeah, I think Truck and Xfinity or even ARCA put a weekend out there with two or three of those series, and I think it'd be great.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll certainly keep tabs on what's going on there at Kentucky Speedway. Blake's going to stick around with us. We got plenty more to get to. We'll get to our mailbag segment coming up in a bit. But first, let's get to our news and notes. Dominic, we'll start with you. Where do you want to lead us off this week?
Well, let's get more of those pieces figured out for 2025. And we do have another silly season piece to get to, that being with Eric Jones and Legacy Motor Club. Announced on Tuesday, August 13th, Eric Jones and Legacy Motor Club have announced that they have agreed to a contract extension through at least 2025. Team says it could go beyond 2025, but Eric Jones will be staying put with the Toyota base team. Jones has been racing for Legacy Motor Club since 2021 when it was branded as Richard Petty Motorsports, later purchased by Jimmy Johnson. But this will mark in 2025 his fifth season with the organization. And certainly it seems at least Legacy Motor Club would like Eric Jones, who has won at least one race under their banner at Darlington in 2022, to continue to be that head of the team, at least of the full-time drivers, and wants Eric Jones to help propel the team into the future.
There was rumors that Spire was interested in taking Eric Jones, but ultimately he's going to stay with them. Guys, this might be a hot take, but I'll throw this out there. I think if talking pure drivers, not their equipment situation or anything like that, but just from a pure driving standpoint, I think Eric Jones is a top 12, at the very least, top 15 driver in the Cup Series. But he has had horrible luck. I thought that he did a decent job at Joe Gibbs. Unfortunate circumstance that he lost his ride there, but they had Christopher Bell and had to choose between the two. Can't say they made the wrong choice. Christopher Bell's been pretty good. Legacy Motor Club, he did pretty well to start, but they changed from Chevy to Toyota, and they weren't getting much help from Chevy. Their final year with Chevy, since joining Toyota, it's been a struggle for them to adapt. Just terrible luck. Like, I hope that if Eric Jones is staying there at Legacy Motor Club, that they give him the support that he needs, because he's a talented race car driver. He can compete for wins, but I mean, this guy, he's got to have a better situation than the hand that he's been dealt his entire career. Blake, what say you? What do you think about Eric Jones staying there with Legacy?
I'm with you 100%, Tyler. I believe they need to give him more support. He is a top tier driver. We see he can do it in good equipment as far as his time with Joe Gibbs Racing. I think, he's definitely a great driver behind the wheel. Great individual to talk to. I mean, we've had the chance, all of us, I'm sure, to talk with him in the garage area. Very respectful, good guy. I kind of was like a few other people. I thought maybe he would be a candidate for Spire, but we see he'll be staying the 43. I mean, no more iconic number than the 43. And like you said, he does have a win there at Darlington. I mean, he could be competitive there again in a couple of weeks. It seems like Darlington's his track. But definitely, I believe a lot of work to be done as far as what Legacy has to do for their drivers.
Yeah, I think so. And, John Hunter Nemechek, it's been an up and down year for him, mostly down on that front. Jimmy Johnson has struggled when he stepped into part-time races this year. And what I find fascinating, Dom, is it's not a lack of funds that they have there. I mean, you forgot to mention Maury Gallagher was the guy that bought that team from Petty, not Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson was brought in as a side investor, but it was Gallagher writing the checks. They got all that Allegiant Airlines money. They just haven't seen any results really to speak of. And we know what Gallagher did at GMS Racing in the Truck Series. And it's just been a little more difficult to translate that to the Cup Series here, Dom.
It certainly has. It reminds me of Germain Racing in the Truck Series, winning a championship and just not really adjusting to Cup. Maybe not the best comparison, but you're right. The results really haven't been there. We've seen the win, but that was with the Richard Petty Motorsports branding, the Legacy Motor Club branding. It's been a little slow out of the gate, but to their credit, too, John Hunter Nemechek showing some speed on road courses, beginning the year with that fast start, 2 top 10 finishes. Eric Jones, of course, maybe on his way to a victory at Talladega before the Toyota crash and debacle that put him out of the car for a couple of weeks. But they've shown some flashes of brilliance, but those flashes have been far and few between. But I would have to imagine, Tyler, giving a contract extension like this. We talk about momentum a lot on the show. That has to give a little bit of momentum. That has to give a little bit of sigh of relief too, because you're going to be around and you can start building a little more consistency if you know you're going to be part of the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think so. Dom, let's talk now about what's going on with Daniel Suarez staying with Trackhouse. But I thought it was fascinating of him staying with Trackhouse. They had all this hoopla and everything, pomp and circumstance about a 1-year extension. Really?
Yeah, and Blake, I know you were there too. I'd love to hear your take on this. When Daniel won in Atlanta in February, Justin Marks gets up there at the podium. They're addressing the media, and Justin Marks straight up told us pretty much we didn't know what we were all talking about Suarez being on the hot seat. That there's so many conversations behind the scene that he was never on the hot seat. But Blake, I gotta imagine too. This was announced last week that Daniel Suarez would be back in the '99 car through at least next year. Gotta imagine the win helped, but to only get a 1-year contract extension is somewhat of an eyebrow raiser. I got to imagine there's some sort of hot seat somewhere.
Yeah, and like Tyler said, a lot of pomp and circumstance for a 1-year contract extension on that 99 car. You see a lot, just like today with the announcement of Eric Jones multi-year. Is that 2? Is that 3? Is that 5? We don't know. But to say it's a 1-year deal for Daniel Suarez, I still got to sit there and wonder, he has to be in the back of his mind. It's just one more year. I mean, am I going to be in the same shape that I'm in, 2 weeks ago, a year from now?
That's so true.
And you look at that stable, and we'll talk about one of their younger drivers here in just a moment, but you think about what they're developing. We know about SVG, of course. And all their young drivers, Zane Smith, of course, in that camp, and there's been rumblings that Zane actually might not be in their camp much longer, that they might not have enough seats potentially, but you want to keep everybody there. They're kind of doing their own Toyota thing when it comes to these development drivers, but only so many seats. Right now, they only have 2. They're going to have to buy more charters or do something to keep these guys, or somebody's going to be the odd man out here. Suarez, he's only under contract for 1 more year next year, and he's got to be hoping that he races hard. Realistically, Dom, I think about it this way. If Suarez goes out and wins and makes playoff next year, and he's back another year, I think this is a year-to-year thing until he doesn't perform, and then they say, all right, now it's SVG's turn. Now it's Zane Smith's turn. Now it's whoever at this point. I think that's the situation Suarez is in right now. I think that Ross is the only one that's going to be there long-term for sure.
Ross seems like the long-term solution. It's kind of like, and I'm not saying it's a bad boss situation, but think about like if somebody is on a year-to-year contract at their job and they're just waiting for an excuse for you to slip up because they have somebody younger in the wings waiting to come in. It kind of feels like that, Tyler.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking here, Blake?
Yeah, like you guys just mentioned, there's so many drivers for Trackhouse, sitting there waiting in the wings for a ride. It's kind of like you said, one of those deals. Well, we don't have anybody exactly ready yet that can outperform Suarez, so we'll keep him for another year, see how he does. If he doesn't perform, I'd say Zane Smith may be ready, or maybe a young Connor Zilich may be ready.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Connor here in just a second. But SVG, Tom, that's another guy. Like, he's in his mid-30s. He's no spring chicken. He's been winning races in the Xfinity Series. He's getting better on ovals. They got to find a cup ride for him next year. It doesn't necessarily have to be in their camp, but he's got to be in Cup next year, whether it's Colleague or somebody. Aspire. I mean, you can't waste a year on him at this point in his career in Xfinity next year.
You're right. He's not 16. He's not 17 like some of these guys. And I think in these conversations we've had on the podcast over this year, Tyler, maybe I wasn't sold on SVG going to Cup, but I think you've kind of convinced me more that, you know what? There is that argument to be made. He's winning a bunch in Xfinity. He clearly has the Xfinity races down. We saw him run well at the street course. We saw him run well at the Coke 600 at Talladega. We know it's going to take time, but it's like when AJ Allmendinger went full-time for Colleague. We knew, okay, that's a smart pick because he could win a road course or a super speedway race during the playoffs. I feel like we can see that with SVG. Who's not to say maybe we see him in that 16 All-Star car and make him the All-Star driver?
Maybe. That certainly could be possible, and that would be a big help to Colleague with funding that SVG potentially could bring too, and with Trackhouse on board as far as that goes. That's not all with Team Trackhouse, though, Tom.
That is not, and we know about these drivers in the wings that we've talked about, and Connor Zilich getting the call to go to NASCAR Xfinity Racing in 2025. On the Dale Jr. Download, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s podcast, it was announced on Wednesday, August 7th, that Connor will be taking the reins of the number 88 car full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's made select truck starts, has torn it up in ARCA and sports car racing, but we know this young man is going to be driving for a championship, racing for a championship in that 88 car. Gotta say, Tyler, very solid pick. And Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s camp having him. We know it's a Trackhouse thing, kind of on loan, but gotta imagine it's a win-win for everybody in this situation.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating, we mentioned the Trackhouse aspect. We've seen, Blake, where Trackhouse, they've loaned drivers out to Spire, to Colleague, and Junior Motorsports has always been a Hendrick camp. And I know it's the Chevy umbrella and everything here, but this is a first for Trackhouse and for Junior Motorsports. Junior going outside the Hendrick realm and Trackhouse going into Hendrick territory here. I think this is big for all parties involved here, of Junior tapping into Trackhouse, of Trackhouse working with him, and Connor Zelich, getting to go with one of, if not the best teams in the Xfinity Series of Junior Motorsports here. I was surprised to see all these parties involved get together and make this work, that the Hendrick family would open their doors to a Trackhouse guy.
Yeah, I was surprised too. And I go back every time Dale Jr. is getting ready to make an announcement. Oh, he's going cup racing. No, he's not going to go cup racing. Announce that on the Dale Jr. download on a Wednesday. But, yeah, big news for that. And I'd like to have been a fly on the wall in some of those meeting rooms to see how this is going to work. Like you mentioned, Sam Mayer not really performing. Rumor he could be out as far as the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So there's not really anybody in Junior Motorsports that's really ready to jump up to Cup to really, make that move. There's no Chase Elliott 2014 sitting there waiting to go to Cup. Justin Allgaier is content in that 7 car. So I think they're looking elsewhere to try to find out how they can make that move and move these drivers up. And they saw an open seat in that 88, which has been, an all-star car this year of sorts. So I think that'll be interesting to see.
So 2 questions arise from this, and I'd love to hear either of your takes on it. We know Dale Earnhardt Jr. and his Unilever sponsorship, they love to have him at least one race a year. That's my first question. Is this the final year of Dale Jr. doing these 1-2 race deals? And then the second question, you bring up those points with Sam Mayer and Brandon Jones. We know that not possibly returning to those organizations next year. Does that open the door for Carson Kvapil? So Junior, Carson Kvapil, kind of a twofold question here. Let's start with you, Tyler. What happens to both? And then we'll hear from Blake.
I very well could see Carson Kvapil getting the call up to the Xfinity Series. I think that's very likely. I'm not ready to say we're done on seeing Dale Jr. just yet, because remember, as of late, Hendrick's been running Xfinity cars that are put together by Junior Motorsports, and obviously there's a lot of stuff going on there of, from sponsorship arrangements and all that. Hell, Boris said runs for Hendrick in the Xfinity Series. If Junior still wants to go Xfinity racing, even if there technically isn't a spot from his own team, they can pull out a Hendrick car, do whatever they need to do, and find a way to make it work. I'm not convinced that Junior's quite done yet. I think that if they do fill all those seats, they'll find a way one way or the other. If he wants to be an Xfinity ride, he'll find a way. I'm not ready to say that's over with yet. What say you, Blake?
I'm with you, Tyler. I believe, that 17 car that Hendrick has, it's a Junior Motorsports prepared Chevrolet. I think the opportunity is there for him to hop in there. I think you could also see Kvapil maybe move up, like you said, to the Xfinity Series with those 2 open seats of Mayer, and it appears maybe Brandon Jones going back to his former home at Joe Gibbs Racing is being a rumor. I think that the opportunity's there, and I don't think I've ever seen a season with more Xfinity silly season to it than I have Cup until I see this year.
Yeah, and guys staying within the series, moving different teams is very unusual, but I think if anything, Dom, it speaks to the strength of the Xfinity Series right now. And next year they get this new TV deal with the CW that's going to pay $150 million, which is a lot for Xfinity. It's going to be quadruple what IndyCar is getting from Fox. The Xfinity Series is showing a lot of strength and a lot of prowess, if you will, heading into this next chapter. I think NASCAR's got to feel good about where the state of the Xfinity Series is right now. And we've heard the rumblings about turning Xfinity into an EV series or something like that. NASCAR has to be happy with that product. And silly season right now, I think, is a result of that.
It certainly is, and more money infused in that series. Who wins? The teams, the drivers, and we've talked about it on this show, and we've had David on too. I think we would all agree that the Xfinity series sometimes just puts on the best racing, the most competitiveness, the most raw talent that you see on the racetrack in all three touring series. Time and time again, that NASCAR Xfinity series, you see some great drivers, some great cars. You see good teams go home in Xfinity. You still have it where there's drivers missing the show, whether it be through qualifying or whatever the case may be. We have full fields in Xfinity, or at least how NASCAR deems a full field there at 38. There's good racing. There are good things on the horizon for the Xfinity series. News like this, Connor signing the full-time deal with JR Motorsports, all the speculation of what could surround it, good things for this series, Tyler.
Names are made here, as they say.
They sure are.
The Xfinity series. Dominic, what else we got for news and notes?
So before we move on to the Ask segment, of course, we got to go over prop bets and bets in general for this NASCAR race weekend, this upcoming week at Michigan with FireKeepers Casino 400. Now, Blake, what we do on the show, when we go over the odds, we love to do this. We have everybody go around the room and guess who is the odds-on favorite and what are their odds. I will preface with this, guys. We have two odds-on favorites before any laps have been turned on the track with the same odds. Who do you guys think those two odds-on favorites are and the odds?
I'll let Blake start. What do you think, man?
I tell you what, no, without looking at anything, I think Hamlin's probably number one in Larson.
Tyler?
I would go with the same, and I would think about both of them at plus 650.
650. What do you say, Blake?
700.
Dang, you guys are good. Tyler, did you look at my notes before we get started? It is Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin as your odds-on favorite at plus 650.
I'll be honest, I did actually stumble upon the DraftKings odds.
Okay. Well, at
But
least he admitted to everybody.
that would have been my guess.
No, it would have been my guess to probably a Kyle Larson bet. I mean, it seems like Larson and Hamlin have been odds-on favorites everywhere we go outside of the super speedways and outside of the road courses. But yes, Hamlin, a past winner, Larson, a three-time winner at Michigan as well, sitting at plus 650 or 6.5 to 1. Ryan Blaney, former winner and defending series champion, sitting at plus 750 or 7.5 to 1. Martin Truex, who came home second in this race last year to Chris Buescher, sitting at plus 800 or 8 to 1. And last year's winner, Chris Buescher, who remains winless this year, sitting at 15 to 1 or plus 1,500. And of course, some of your long shots as you go through the field, Ryan Preece, Justin Haley, John Hunter Nemechek, sitting at 300 to 1 or plus 30,000. The list could go on here. Prop bets include Larson versus Blaney with a slight edge to Larson, Suarez versus Bowman with a slight edge there to Bowman, and then Elliott and Logano with a slight edge to Logano.
All right. So with that, now that we know the odds, let's go around the room, make some picks. Blake, who wins this weekend at Michigan?
Last year's winner of this race, Kyle Busch, breaks it through and makes it 2 Childress wins in a row to lock herself in the chase.
And they would be feeling a whole lot better about themselves if that is the case. Dom, how about you?
I got to say, Blake, that's a solid pick. And I was thinking Kyle Busch will be a factor. We've seen RCR show speed at intermediate tracks. I don't see them get it done, but I do see Kyle Busch being a factor of the win, facing off against a former teammate. Martin Truex Jr. breaks through and gets that first win of 2024 at Michigan. Tyler?
Damn it, you stole my pick. I'm going with Martin Truex too. I think, folks, Martin Truex, this is the swan song. This is the final win of Martin Truex's career, is this weekend at Michigan. And this is our chance to say our goodbyes and, give him his flowers, if you will. This is going to be it for Martin Truex. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin Harvick's last win was Michigan too, right?
In 2022. He had those back-to-back Richmond, Michigan victories, and those were his final one. Or no, Richmond was his final one because Michigan was the week before. But he did not have back-to-back wins. But yes, we have seen drivers pick up their final wins here at Michigan. Who's not to say it could be true. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. All right. Final segment before we go. It's our mailbag segment. We ask you to submit questions to us, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. Also, Star Podcast on X and Facebook. You can submit questions to us each and every week for the panel. And we begin this first question. It comes from Arthur. Arthur wants to know, Blake, with you being from Kentucky, what is your favorite form of Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Can't go wrong with original. I like the original recipe. Yeah.
From KFC?
From KFC.
Really? Okay. What about just chicken in Kentucky in general? What are some of your favorite spots?
I tell you what, KFC is good. But I tell you what, I'm going to go with the Colonel's cousin. It's either Colonel's cousin or nephew, Lee's Chicken. I don't know if you ever had Lee's.
No.
Love it. I think it's better than KFC. And of course, he and the Colonel were related. I believe he was his nephew or his cousin, but I prefer Lee's Chicken. Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that he had a cousin that made fried chicken too. Okay.
Yes, they did. And I tried Slim Chickens this week because they sponsored Elliott. I thought, if you're going to support NASCAR, I'll give you a try. And I kind of like some Slim Chickens this past week.
Okay. Can't go wrong with that. Dominic, how about you? Not going to say KFC on me, are you?
Well, I was trying to think of, I've tried Bojangles, I've tried KFC, and it's all that comes to mind, to be honest. I don't have fried chicken often, and it's probably been a year since I have, but KFC, can't go wrong with KFC, Tyler. Mashed potatoes, too. That big bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy, and you have the fried chicken, have a little packet of honey, too. You can have chicken as a main meal or even have it with a dessert, dip it in some honey. I don't know, maybe a New Mexico thing, but pretty good.
Oh, my goodness. Folks, I thought we'd be doing better than KFC here. My goodness. I feel embarrassed that we're going to KFC. I mean, KFC's okay, but goodness gracious. I do love Bojangles. My favorite, if we're talking like, it's turned into a chain over time now. It wasn't always this way. I love me some Hattie B's Nashville chicken.
Yes.
They have Hattie B's here in Dallas now, where I'm at. At the Nashville Super Speedway, they sell Hattie B's at the racetrack too. So you can get your Hattie B's and watch some NASCAR and have a good time. So
they fed us Hattie B's in the media center during the Cup race this past Nashville Super Speedway race.
That's right. I was there. Yeah, I remember that they had that. That was very, very good. So yeah, Hattie B's would be my choice of a fried chicken there. Another question in the mailbag this week comes from Corey. Corey wants to know, guys, are any of you related to any famous people? Blake, let's start with you. You related to anybody famous?
Nope, nobody famous on my end. Not that I know of anyways. We'll wait and see after the wheels are made up. Maybe I end up in one. I'm not sure.
Okay. Dominic, how about you?
I'm trying to think hard on that, just kind of getting that. Not really. Would you consider politicians famous? Like local politicians that serve I don't know. So long story short, we have my dad's sister, her husband, his dad. Okay, so kind of follow the chain there. Tebow Chavez was the lieutenant governor of the state of New Mexico in the 70s or 80s. So that would probably be my only famous person that I'm related to, but that might be a stretch because that might just be more on a local level. Tyler, I know you've had some cool stories on them. Who are you related to?
So no one in the immediate family, but like of distant relatives. I had a great grandfather that like he was it was either my great grandfather or my great grandfather was the Assemblies of God churches. That denomination many, many years ago. And then another relative of mine, like, gosh, 4 great grandfathers back was a hero in the Civil War. And I say hero lightly because he was for the South. But he's got a statue up in the state of Tennessee and everything. So not anybody close in my immediate family, but some relatives back. That's about as good as it gets for me as far as that goes. So I guess that makes Dom. I guess that just makes between the three of us the most famous people in our own families.
I like that answer. Yeah. I'd be curious. We'll have David actually back on the show with us next week, Tyler. We haven't really asked him. It's kind of one of the just low-hanging fruit. I mean, he's got to be related to somebody famous named Starr. I got to imagine. And it's not a common last name. We've never asked him if he's related to Ringo. I know that's a stage name, but David's got to be related to somebody famous, I imagine.
I would think. There can't be too many stars out there. So there's only one star, David Starr. Before we go, guys, around the room, Blake, what's going on with you the next couple days, man? What's the next racetracks you're hitting up here?
Until I'll be back at the local scene this weekend behind the mic here in Owensboro. My next Cup race will be the Atlanta race there, the Quaker State 400. Look forward to seeing Dominic there. And, of course, the Nashville Super Speedway IndyCar finale will be in September as well. So a couple-week break, then get busy again.
Very cool. Very cool. Dominic, what's going on with you?
I'll be staying here in New Mexico for the weekend, just enjoying some family time, celebrating my grandmother's 80th birthday. We're still blessed to have her around, so we're going to celebrate that and have a little thing surrounding that. And then, of course, to spend time with my wife, Felice. Her son, Christopher, should be good. Tyler, I know Summer Jones has had a lot of home days and home weekends as of late, but you've also been traveling. There's still a few weeks left in summer. Where's the Summer of Jones going?
We are staying here this weekend. I got to work. There's nothing I can do about it. I got to work.
That's right.
I got to work the next 2 weeks. NFL preseason. Same thing last week. Had to work last week too. NFL preseason. But I will be in Vegas soon enough here in a few weeks for the USC LSU Vegas college football kickoff game. So that's my next road trip here in the next few weeks. But for now, just working hard ahead and certainly some good things coming up. So, folks, we'll put the checkered flag out on this edition of Let's Go Racing. Blake, before we go, plug away. Where can people follow you and see all the stuff you're doing, man?
Yeah, give me a follow on Twitter at Blake on the Mic, also on Facebook as well, at Blake on the Mic. Give us a follow on Facebook for Let's Talk Racing Show. And you can tune into all of our shows every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Time at owensbororadio.com/WVJS.
There you have it. That is Blake Smith joining us this week. As always, subscribe to the show. New episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, check us out on social media at Star Podcasts on Facebook and X. Also by email, davidstarpodcasts@gmail.com. Check out the Studio Soapbox Network. This show, along with the Jones Report, the Coach Bo Knows podcast, available on all podcast platforms. For Dominic Aragon, Blake Smith, David Starr, entire crew, I'm Tyler Jones. Thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.